hosting me again. Such a pleasure. And thank you all for being here and caring about learning to support your students who are also new parents. So today, a little different if you were here last time when we did mostly slides and a little bit of the exercises. Today, I'd actually like to focus on movement on the mat. We'll start with our slides, but I would like to save a bit of time for a yoga practice. So if you're just coming in, grab whatever props you have at home, grab a mat, two blocks or books, a strap, a blanket or a towel or a scarf. I think that's everything. Yeah, and you can lay that out. Today, I'm going to be starting with slides and presentation to talk about what to expect when you're no longer expecting. And I'm going to kind of zip and skip through some of these slides to give you a broad brushstrokes perspective of the changes that happen physiologically, energetically after you've had a baby. Then we'll look at what is unique to us as yoga teachers. So contraindications, optimizing. I really chose this word carefully because I think sometimes as yoga community, we think of postnatal yoga as just watered down or modified yoga practice that the rest of everyone else in the class could do. When in fact, I have a different perspective. I believe that postnatal yoga is a really potent way to slow down and recalibrate the way that we view total body alignment, the way that we breathe, having healthy breathing patterns, and the way that we can isolate and integrate the deep core. And I'll be teaching what the deep core is and how we access this. We'll do this together on our mats today. But this is a really relevant practice for new parents after all the massive changes after having a baby that goes on in the body, but also perhaps for you yourself, fellow yoga teacher, or for your advanced practitioners who are working on poses like press handstands or inversions or a deeper understanding of the bandhas. The very same deep core exercises that I share in my postnatal community are what I call simple but not easy. So you can teach them to someone who's just had a baby, you can teach them to your grandparents, but also they're, when you really key into what you are actually doing, the keys to unlock some of the more advanced posture work as well. So I hope that this practice is relevant for you on a personal level, but also to help your students who've recently had a baby. Like Lizzie mentioned, if you want to go deeper into this material, if you're interested in developing a niche, working with pre and postnatal yoga students or clients, once a year, I offer a prenatal yoga teacher training. It's Yoga Alliance registered. It is 100% online. So there are about 40 hours of live calls. It's a lot of live call time where we can interact. But there's also some flexible modules that you can do on your own time, recorded lectures and work you can move through at your own pace. That starts December 10th. So if you are interested, I'm going to drop the link here, and I'm offering the coupon code, I'm typing it in the chat here, BOLSTER, all caps, to get $200 off if you register within the next week. So that's anytime before November 22nd, you can use that code BOLSTER to join the teacher training. We kick off in just under 1 month on December 10th, and you would be a certified prenatal teacher in time for Valentine's Day. So if that speaks to anyone, there's the link, there's the coupon code. But for now, I am going to share my screen and we'll dive into the slides together. All right. So first, I am going to move quickly. I mentioned I might skip some of these slides or go kind of quickly through some of these slides on what to expect when you're no longer expecting, just for the sake of our time today so we can get onto the mat. Then we'll look at what's more applicable for us yoga teachers, the contraindications and the optimizing, and what is the deep core, like I mentioned earlier. So I'm not going to read this poem out loud, but I will share the slides with B-Yogis so they can send them out to you. This is a beautiful poem called Motherlode by Kate Bayer. First, I want to show a zip through my postpartum journey with my second. So with my first, I took pictures of the week to week growing belly. And then I realized, with my second, it might be nice to document the experience after you have a baby, because I think sometimes we don't acknowledge the fact that we actually still look about 5 or 6 months pregnant in the days and weeks after giving birth. And this is completely normal. The uterus takes about 6 weeks to shrink back to its pre-pregnancy size. So this is not to say that this is the norm or what anyone else's journey should look like, but I just thought it might be interesting to share a little bit of what mine looked like. This is the day I went into labor. Went on a nice long walk around the neighborhood while having contractions. When I would just kind of scoop under my bump and lift up and take some deep breaths and stop in my tracks. And then I kept walking as the contractions subside. They were very tolerable. I went to the birth center at 10 p.m., had my baby in the dawn hours, and then that same day was home by like noon. And when my older son saw me, he pointed at the belly, even though I was holding his little brother in my arms, and said, "Oh, is there another baby in there?" So it's, again, completely normal to look pregnant even after you just gave birth. Still looking pregnant at 1 day postpartum and at 2 days postpartum. Here I am with all the laundry accumulating, the nursing pads, the hospital grade disposable adult diapers that they give you, just keeping it real, that postpartum period. And the baby grows so much in the first month. It's really amazing how much changes and opens in your baby's body and personality in that first month. By 3 months postpartum, I had a habit with my second of practicing alongside him. So he did tummy time strengthening, like little bhujangasana cobra pose for him while I was doing my yoga practice. And it was just good energy in the room. We were doing our separate parallel play, yoga mat for him, yoga mat for me. By 3 months, I was able to get back into my press handstands because, like I mentioned earlier, of the work that I did with my first, doing these reclaim your center exercises that I'm going to show you. I could not do a press handstand before I had my first baby. So I was a yoga teacher. I've been a yoga teacher since 2006. I was a professional dancer before I was a yoga teacher. I've always had like a strong core, but it was really the superficial core muscles that were strong. And so after stretching out the surface core for 40 weeks, growing a human, then I had to rehabilitate. And I had to start from the deep inner layers of the core, the pelvic floor, the transverse abdominis, the multifidus, these spinal stabilizers, learning how to breathe well, the thoracic diaphragm. And from this groundwork of core containment, support, integrity, that was the breakthrough moment for me with finding independence in a handstand off the wall for a minute reliably and learning how to do a press handstand. So really, these skill sets, though very simple and very accessible, are the keys to also unlock pretty advanced posture work. The early postpartum period is 0 to 6 weeks, and this is when you rest is your most important element of returning to strength. Then there's what I call the fourth trimester. This is the first 3 months postpartum, and this is when you can start doing some of the exercises that I'll be showing today. But I would not recommend starting until you get doctor or midwife clearance with any full exercise program. There's small things you can do. Why? Well, when you give birth, no matter what kind of birth, you also birth the placenta. And the placenta is about the size of a dinner plate, 10 inches across, sits in the uterus. When it detaches, there's a bleeding process called lochia. It's like a menstrual period. This can last anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. So you want to allow this wound to heal and this bleeding to stop before you begin vigorous exercise. You also might have stitches low near the pelvis or the abdomen if you had a cesarean, or even in the pelvic floor, in the perineum itself, if you had a little bit of tearing, which is really normal with a vaginal birth. In addition to this, your pelvic organs sit lower in the body after birth. And if you do vigorous exercise, aerobic exercise, high impact exercise, strenuous core work, this can lead to organ prolapse, which we definitely want to avoid. So there are some gentle practices you can do in that immediate period, but I think the most important thing is rest and eating nourishing foods and bonding with your baby. I'm going to zip through these, so stay with me. 1 week, cervix shrinks back to its original size. Within 6 weeks, your uterus shrinks back to its normal size. And the 6-week checkup is checking tearing, uterus size, that it has gone back, bleeding. They're checking if, many will check for a diastasis recti, the thinning and stretching of the connective tissue called the linea alba from your xiphoid process to your pubis. They're also going to check in with mood and mental health, since postpartum depression affects about 50% of first-time moms, and your feeding journey. But I will mention that in the American hospital system, this check-in at 6 weeks is on average just 10 minutes. If a mom is breastfeeding, she's also learning the art of breastfeeding, which is a huge adjustment on all levels. I love this cartoon. It's very accurate. You are carrying an 8-pound weight with you wherever you go. So this baby that is always with you now can affect wrists, elbows, shoulders, neck, spinal posture, your whole body alignment. It's a big consideration for us as yoga teachers. It can lead to something called upper cross syndrome. You can see the green muscles are like overstretched and the red muscles are short and tight. So both strengthening the upper back as well as passive stretches like this that open the pecs, the anterior delts, the front body, lift the T-spine up into the front body are fantastic. When you do tummy time with your baby here in a supported fish, they also get the benefit. I mean, right here, my baby honestly is just asleep, and they sleep a lot in those first weeks, but they get the benefit of strengthening their paraspinals. So they get that prep for crawling and slithering and strengthening. Lots of hormone fluctuations. There's something called adrenal fatigue, which is made up of a cumulative sleep debt, and these big hormonal shifts and changes that are occurring can affect your mood, your concentration. So as yoga teachers, just having a slow and steady pace, even repetition, which I think is underrated and very valuable to our students, can be a great tool in your sequencing of postnatal students. Repetition, repetition, slow, simple. I want to just touch briefly on the topic of scope of practice, because it's out of our scope of practice as yoga teachers to diagnose or to treat any kind of pelvic issue that a student might be having postpartum. But it is common for students, if they've had 3rd or 4th degree tearing, forceps delivery, assisted delivery, vacuum assisted delivery, episiotomy, which is fortunately not as common these days, to have a longer road to recovery before. It might be longer than 6 weeks before they resume their usual 90-minute vinyasa yoga practice, right? If a student talks about a feeling of heaviness in the pelvic floor, or feels like things are bulging or leaking or dropping out from under them, this could be a sign of prolapse. And this would definitely be way out of our scope of practice as yoga teachers. They need to be referred out to a urogynecologist and or a pelvic floor physical therapist. So a lot of vaginal births will result in a 1st or 2nd degree tear. But if it's a 3rd or 4th degree tear, there are definitely other healthcare providers that this student would need to see. Your organs are settling back into place. There's an emotional, psychological component to birth if your birth didn't go as planned, or if you experienced birth trauma or not feeling listened to in the way that you wanted in that really vulnerable moment of giving birth. So yoga, meditation, I encourage all my students to journal and write about their birth story as a way of healing and processing any loose ends, any pieces of their story that they haven't integrated completely. As parents, we put so much energy into caring for our children. I think it's important to remember this quote by the Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield: if your circle of compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. So amidst, caring for a newborn, it's also important to take a moment and honor your own experience in giving birth, and maybe talk about it with a good friend or a family member, or journal about it for yourself. I spoke briefly already about postpartum depression, how this affects up to 50% of first-time moms. Another out of our scope of practice. As a yoga teacher, you would refer out to a therapist for that. The pelvic joints and bones might be slightly out of place from pregnancy, from the relaxin hormone that opens the joint space to give birth, from birth itself, right? Moving baby through the pelvis. And also from postpartum, where you have this 8-pound baby that you're carrying with you all the time, and maybe you carry them on one hip or in one arm all the time, and this can cause asymmetries in our joints. So keep an eye on your students' pelvic alignment in asymmetrical poses like lunges, and implement strengthening the muscles that attach around the pelvis into your yoga program for postnatal students. So in Pilates, for example, the core, it's not just like the stomach muscles, it's called the powerhouse, and it includes all the muscles that connect around the pelvis. Even the glutes would be thought of as a core muscle. And that glute med is a great one for new parents to bring stability to the pelvis and the lumbar spine. Katie Bowman, who wrote the book Diastasis Recti, mentions the calf stretch as one of the single most important exercises for new parents, because tension, tightness in your hamstrings, right, in the back of your thighs and in your calves can produce, I'm going to stand on my mat so you can see, can produce a pulley system, kind of a pulling on your pelvis, which pulls the tailbone under and pulls your pelvis into the posterior tilt, right? That kind of tucked under alignment. And so stretching the calves can open up and affect everything up above from pelvis to spine. Breastfeeding, I'll just mention briefly, is a major metabolic demand on the body. It burns about 500 calories a day. Cesarean section is a major abdominal surgery. So this is a pretty intense healing process for your students who have gone through C-section. I have students who've gone through it 25 years ago that still, when they do Urdhva Dhanurasana, when they press up into the upright bow pose or wheel pose, whatever you'd like to call it, they feel a pulling sensation around their cesarean scar. So in my prenatal teacher training, our pelvic floor physical therapist comes in and lectures. She does an amazing 4-hour lecture on pelvic floor, and she includes a little bit of information on massage for cesarean incisions after they've healed and desensitizing around the incision. In general from this, I know I've skipped through it pretty quickly, but the takeaway that I want to reinforce is, it takes 40 weeks to create your baby, and it should also be a very slow and gradual process to recuperate. And I like the parable of the tortoise and the hare, because it's the tortoise, it's the slow and steady that's going to win the race. And if we can take time to slow down, lay the groundwork of connecting to the deep core, from my personal experience and other students that I've seen, your practice can actually go beyond where you left it. So it's not just, oh, I want to go back to how I used to practice before I had a baby, but actually the process of rehabilitating, of strengthening, of reconnecting can take you further than where you might even imagine as a new parent practicing yoga. All right, so now I'm going to dive into our contraindications and optimizing practice for postnatal students. This is more applicable for yoga teachers when we're thinking about how to welcome these students into our classes. So you want to avoid crunches and sit-ups in the 4th trimester, in this kind of more immediate after 6 weeks up to 4 months postpartum period. Instead of sit-ups and crunches, which could exacerbate a diastasis recti, heel drop, which we'll do together in a moment, is a wonderful way to access the deeper layers of the core. So when you do a sit-up or a crunch, you're strengthening your rectus abdominis, your 6-pack muscles, the superficial most layer of your front abdominal core. When you do heel drop, you're accessing the deep transverse abdominis, this horizontal corset-like band of muscles. If you just pretend to cough and you feel how your belly kind of corsets, that is your transverse abdominis. That's the muscle we're looking for. You want to avoid deep back bends that might thin and stretch an already compromised, thinned out and stretched linea alba, the connective tissue that I mentioned earlier that thins and stretches, loses its tensegrity, might be wider of a gap and deeper and softer in towards the middle after giving birth. Encourage a slow flow for students because they're really getting to know a brand new body. I think even when you're pregnant and there's these gradual shifts week to week, they feel pretty massive. But it's very disorienting to practice in a body that after you give birth, it shifts a lot quicker. The postpartum body shifts happen at a much quicker rate than the week to week growth when you're pregnant. So we need to get to know our bodies, and that can be facilitated by a slower flow. You want to advise caution with deep twists that are leveraged from the limbs, where you're twisting not by using the core itself, but from your limbs. This can cause a disconnect to the center of the body, which is not great when you're healing, rehabilitating, and strengthening these tissues. Plank poses can be reintroduced. It's not like you never want to do them, but if there is a diastasis, if there's urinary incontinence, if there's a bulging or a doming around the middle of the belly, these are contraindicated poses. Basically, you want to learn how to manage pressure in the abdomen by activating that deep core canister that we'll look at in a moment before you add planks and crunches and poses that create that intra-abdominal pressure. Belly down poses are fine. However, if you're breastfeeding, your students might experience moments in class where they feel engorged, where their breasts just feel really full and it's not comfortable to lie down. So that's just based on comfort. Belly breathing, I do not advise in an active yoga practice. If you're a restorative yoga teacher, belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing is great for your postnatal students. The inhale stretches the pelvic floor, and the exhale, there's a lifting and a drawing in and up, up, up of the pelvic floor. Fantastic. However, if you're teaching belly breathing in vinyasa yoga, you're not enforcing stability around the low back and the pelvis. Your students need a little bit more support there with their breathing patterns. So we'll talk about breathing patterns for different styles of practice in a moment. The diastasis recti, I'll show some pictures of it because I've mentioned it a few times, is completely normal to have happen to your body during pregnancy. Every pregnant person will experience some degree of diastasis recti, more depending on your collagen, your genetics, if you're having twins or triplets, these kinds of things, if it's your second or third baby. At 6 weeks, 69% of folks who've had a baby have a diastasis. At 6 months, 39%, and at 12 months, 32%. So it is more common than we might think. She's showing how you check a diastasis. Again, out of our scope of practice to diagnose, but how she is checking is doing a little sit-up, lifting her head, and measuring from xiphoid to pubis, that whole length of the line, for areas that feel mushier, softer, deeper, and also measuring the width, how many fingers across she can fit. This is what a diastasis recti might look like. And you can see there's different patterns. There's a C-section pattern with diastasis. A lot of people will have that middle one around the navel just because the umbilicus can be a weak point for the connective tissue. When we talk about these Reclaim Your Center exercises that we'll be exploring in a moment, there's really three components that we want to look at. Alignment. Is your chest sunken or collapsed? Do you pop your ribs forward? Is your pelvis always in an anterior or a posterior pelvic tilt? Are your calves tight? Can you stand down through the four corners of your feet? Can you activate both glutes? These kind of alignment issues can be telltale for what's going on in your body, how you're able to breathe, how you're able to balance and manage pressure around the core. So there's a sense of balance, front, sides, back, top, and bottom. Breath. How are you breathing? Is the thoracic diaphragm locked upwards from growing a baby, and the uterus rises from a pelvic organ all the way up under your breasts full term to an abdominal organ? This can push the thoracic diaphragm upwards and create more of a chest breathing pattern, poor breathing patterns, restricted movement of the thoracic diaphragm. This also can create anxiety, which is really common, anxiety and depression in the postpartum period. So how are you able to breathe? And the way that we breathe, not just into the front, but the sides and the back, helps us manage pressure in our bodies. When we have a lot of thinned and stretched tissue in the front, we need to start considering how do we manage pressure all around so we don't just go out into that thin, weak part of the body. And then, of course, exercises, which we'll be doing. So I want to show some slides of alignment patterns I see in new parents. Really common. This is called sway back. And sway back is when the pelvis is in a posterior tilt. So the tailbone is tucked under. and the knees lock out and the ribs shear forwards. So this happens a lot with front baby wearing. I'm a huge fan of baby wearing. It's awesome. But when you wear your baby for extended periods in a front carry position, this is a really common problem. And that rib shearing is also going to thin and stretch the abdomen, which has already been thinned and stretched from 40 weeks of growing a human. This is different. This is called lumbar lordosis. So in lumbar lordosis, the pelvis is actually not in a posterior tilt, it's in an anterior tilt. Do you see? I'm going to stand on my mat. In a lumbar lordosis, the pelvis tips forward, spills forward, and the lumbar curve exaggerates. In sway back, the pelvis is in a posterior tilt and the ribs shear forward. So they're kind of different things. And I'll sort of zip back to this slide so you can see, because I think often even yoga teachers confuse the terms lordosis and sway back or interchange them when technically they're two different things, but both are really common from baby wearing. As soon as you can wear that baby on your back, I highly recommend it because it's easier to have good body mechanics. Baby's alignment matters when you're baby wearing as well. Now, here's some other things we do with our body as new parents. We pick up a heavy car seat, or we pick up a baby off the ground after a diaper change. As yoga teachers, we know to cue effort on the exhale. When we exhale, the pelvic floor draws in and up, and we create a way of managing pressure, of containing and bracing around pelvis and low back. So then exhale, you can pick up the car seat and it won't feel like your pelvic organs are going to drop out through your pelvic floor if you've just had a new baby. So just applying some of these principles on the mat into our new life off the mat can be really helpful. I love this from the Bell method, comparing lifting your baby up out of the crib to a deadlift. So instead of rounding over the crib, hinging from the hips, getting close into the crib. Same would go for lifting your baby off the floor. Breastfeeding or feeding positions are really important. A lot of parents get like wrist and elbow issues from feeding their babies. Laid back nursing, which this mama is demonstrating, is my favorite nursing position for comfort of both the mom and the parent, or the parent and the baby. I'm going to show this slide of the thoracic diaphragm, and it moves. So you can see on the inhale, the lungs fill. Right, as you inhale, the thoracic diaphragm moves down because the lungs fill, and the pelvic floor moves down as well. Now, when you exhale, your lungs empty and your thoracic diaphragm, kind of like an umbrella, goes upward. So does your pelvic floor, in and up, up, up. So there's a sense of Mula Bandha, the root lock, in every exhale. The pelvic floor and the thoracic diaphragm have a parallel pistoning relationship. Do you see? So this is why exhale on the effort, because as you exhale, that pelvic floor braces in and up. Also, this is why exhale for a press handstand. These are slides that show what happens when we do belly breathing and why I would not recommend it in an active yoga practice. 360 rib breathing, which we'll try together, is a great way to manage pressure and move that breath through the thoracic area, the rib cage, the T-spine, front, sides, and back. And we'll do this exercise with the strap together on our mats in a moment. We'll also do this Uddiyana Bandha Kriya, which is when you exhale all the breath out. Don't do this if you're pregnant. You hold the breath, you draw the pelvic floor in and up, up, up. And this acts like a plunger on your pelvic floor. And your pelvic floor too draws in and up, 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 up. So the exercises that we'll be doing strengthen what's called the core canister. This is your core canister. On the top, thoracic diaphragm, the muscle of respiration. On the bottom, pelvic floor. Wrapping around the front, deep transverse abdominis. And in the back, these little spinal stabilizers called multifidus. If you think of your core canister like a can of pop, you can manage pressure, or you might have an imbalance in one side, top or bottom, of this canister. When you have an imbalance of weakness in the pelvic floor, I liken it to a grocery bag with a wet bottom where the groceries can spill through. So tight is not always the answer. Sometimes our students actually have urinary incontinence issues because their pelvic floor is not functioning because it is so tight. So it can either be too tight or too weak. This is out of our scope of practice as yoga teachers. It's the role of the pelvic floor PT to diagnose this. but we want to have a sense of balanced strength and mobility all around the core canister. Things should move well and engage well. Pelvic floor for a man and a woman is actually very similar. These are the muscles between tailbone, pubic bone, and two sitting bones. I already showed the thoracic diaphragm. Here's that horizontal corseting muscle, transverse abdominis. Here's the multifidus in the back. And I think we'll get into the movements. I want to save at least 20 minutes to get on our mats. Before I do, real quick, this is interesting. I think that because we can't really show the activation of the pelvic floor, like we could show a student how we contract or stretch a muscle that's outside of our bodies, that's more visible, we use descriptive imagery. Eric Franklin is the author of this book, Dynamic Imagery for Movement, and he works with Olympic level athletes and professional dancers and has done a lot of research on how metaphoric language and images can reinforce our movement patterns. So find a good metaphor that helps reinforce Mula Bandha. Here's some that I've heard. Zipping up a jacket from your tailbone to your pubic bone, like you're zipping up a winter jacket, and then like an elevator drawing up, up, up from your pelvic floor up towards your thoracic diaphragm, the roof of your mouth. Another image that works for some people is like you're trying to drink a smoothie out of a straw through your pelvic floor. I've heard dynamic Mula Bandha described as wringing out a dish rag within your pelvis. There's lots of different images that you can share with your students, and some will stick for some students. They'll resonate. They'll help them find this activation in their bodies. These are some images from Eric Franklin's book, the geyser rising up out of the bowl of the pelvis, the pelvic floor like the surface of a drum. All right, I'm going to stop the presentation here, and I'd love to move on to our mats now. So I'll meet you on my mat, and if you have props, grab them. If you do yoga better when you're learning new concepts visually, if you want to just watch and do the yoga with your eyes, that's wonderful as well, and we will be sharing the recording with you. I have a blanket laid out over my mat so that you can see with the light color. I'm wearing a dark color so you can see my body a little bit more clearly since my mat is black and I'm wearing black. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just sit, grab a strap. If you don't have a strap, you can use a towel, and place this around the rib cage, right under your chest. And then cinch it. Doesn't have to be super tight, but cinch it in a little ways. So you can slide maybe 1 or 2 fingers under it. That should be good. I'm sitting on a block. I recommend you sit up on something so you can tip forward in your hips. And then keep your eyes open. And what I want you to do is, instead of breathing down to your belly, can you breathe into the circumference of the strap? 360 rib breathing. So inhale. And as you exhale, pelvic floor tones in and up. And then close your eyes and just try that 1 or 2 more times. Inhale into the front, sides, and back of the strap. Feel your body connect into the material of the strap. Expanding and pressing out into it. And as you exhale, the pelvic floor rebounds in and up. You feel there's slack in the strap, right? Do you feel this? Good, do 1 more. And as your pelvic floor tones in and up this time, can you imagine right from the 2 frontal hip points hugging in horizontally to your midline? Okay, good. Open your eyes, move your strap all the way off. And I have this orange blanket, really long, thin strip. You can use a bath towel, a beach towel, a scarf. I wouldn't recommend a yoga strap because it kind of bites into you. It's a little too small. But we'll have this set out, and then I'm going to use this is called a Coregeous ball, but you could also use a block. Have that nearby. To get onto your back, and this goes for your postpartum students, lie on your side to roll onto your back. So basically that goes for getting in and out of bed when you're going to your baby. Instead of doing a sit-up, because remember, this is contraindicated in that immediate postpartum period. So roll to your side, lie down on your back. And I'm gonna put this ball right in between my inner thighs and give a little squeeze. Arms in a goalpost. Mine are here really so you can see what's happening in my pelvis and low back. You can rest yours down if that's more comfortable. So we're gonna start with some pelvic tilts. Tuck your tailbone under, posterior tilt, untuck it, anterior tilt. You're just moving at your pelvis. Your spine can kind of follow, but it'll stay on the mat. And if this is too thick, you can move it out of the way for pelvic tilt, all good. And then I want you to make a diamond, index fingers together, thumbs together, index to pubic bone, thumbs to belly button. The heel of your hand will rest right inside of your pelvic crests. Okay, right inside those ASIS. And then keep tucking and untucking. Posterior tilting, the index fingers are higher, anterior tilting, the thumbs are higher. Now shrink the movement until the thumbs and the index fingers are on the same horizontal plane. That is called neutral pelvis. Keep that, give a little squeeze to the ball, bring your 4 fingertips of either hand right inside those ASIS, those crests of your pelvis, and go south an inch. Now deep breath in to the ribs, and as you exhale, bring your awareness down to your pelvic floor, tone it in and up, squeeze the ball a little, or the block, and hug your front hip points in. You'll feel a little glimmer and activation under your fingertips, yeah? Inhale, ribs expand, let go of the squeeze. Exhale, hug in, pelvic floor up, front hip points like you're drawing a waistband on a pair of sweatpants. Just 40% effort. You don't have to squeeze and grip and bear down. Inhale, relax, neutral pelvis. Exhale, brain to pelvic floor, tones in and up, front hip points hug in. You feel this little glimmer of your deep transverse abdominis pushing up to your fingertips. Good, let go of that. You can keep the ball, grab your fabric, scarf, towel, blanket, fold it across you. And it's at the level of your waist, so you might have to move if it's not. Now, you're not wrapping a corset like in one of those period movies. It's really subtle, it's very gentle, and it's just to reinforce like a splint so we can understand what this muscle, the transverse abdominis, does to hug in. Okay, so same thing, deep breath into the ribs, about 40% exhale. Exhale, draw the effort, draw your pelvic floor up, hip points in, give the fabric a tiny little tug, just a little. So you feel that corseting. Again, deep breath in. Exhale with 40% effort, pelvic floor up, hip points hug in, little squeeze of the fabric. Okay, make sure your pelvis is still neutral. Now let go of the fabric. You can move it out from under you. So that kind of gives us a sense of what we want to do. Move your ball or your block out of the way. Then now we can graduate to heel drop exercise, which I showed in the slideshow. Knees up over hips, neutral pelvis, you're not tucking under. You might also notice the knees want to go in really close. Keep your knees directly over your pelvis. And take a deep breath in. Exhale, right arm overhead and left heel taps down. And then inhale, come back. And exhale, left arm overhead, right heel taps down. Just keep it going like that. Exhale, inhale, exhale. You can make this easier by holding your knees and dropping your heel. This would be a regression. Or you can make it harder, a progression. Press your right palm into your left thigh into your right hand, and then one arm and opposite leg. Exhale on the effort. Inhale, lift. You can do the same on the other side. Exhale on the effort. Inhale, lift. You'll do about 2 or 3 more like that. And Lizzie, I just noticed that you popped in. Did you have anything to, yeah.
So sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I don't think we can hear you.
Oh no.
Sorry, my computer completely froze. Classic. And then something not sure happened, but maybe it's your headphones.
Okay, let me try taking them off. I know there's a few other folks here. Can you leave in the comments if you're having a trouble with the audio?
Oh,
no,
perfect.
Marissa says she does hear me. I think Zoom has been weird lately, Lizzie. I've heard that like from clients with private sessions, they've had a little glitch logging in. Okay, good. Yeah, I hear
We'll
that
keep
other folks.
rolling.
We'll keep going. No, always good to check in with Zoom. Can you hear me? This is so important. Okay, good. I'm glad you, if you can't hear me for any reason, do leave it in the chat, and then Lizzie, let me know if people say in the chat that they can't. But I think we're good. Yeah, we'll keep rolling. Okay, so we were just doing our heel drop, and maybe you did a bunch of those while we were chatting. Let that go. Grab a ball or a block, squeeze in, and then reach your arms up, make fists. And as you exhale, bend your elbows down to the floor close to your waist. Tack your shoulders down. You're going to pick up your chest and squeeze your upper back. Now, from here, press straight down into those elbows and shoulders and go straight up with your hips. Little bridge pose. Doesn't have to be your biggest. And you're going to squeeze into the yoga block. It could be the middle width or the narrow setting. You're going to lengthen your tailbone to the wall in front of you. Telescope your rib bones to the wall behind you. Stay here, or if you'd like, reach forward with the palms of your hands. Deep inhale, 360 rib breathing. As you exhale, hug into the ball, tone the pelvic floor in and up. Imagine your two front hip points hugging in, right? You can see here, if you were doing belly breathing, here, this pose is already stretching the front body. So if you added belly breathing to an upward dog or a bridge pose, that's really going to thin and stretch this connective tissue that's already thinned and stretched. Caution, caution. Come on down. Hold the ball or the block over your head in your hands. Roll onto your left side. This is to get our glute med kind of revving the engine of the glute med. Very important muscle if you're holding your baby on one hip, if you're waddling still after giving birth, like that pregnant waddle, if you're feeling pain in your hips, your knees, your ankles, and your low back, this offers a lot of stability. It's really the fountain of youth, this glute med muscle. Strong glutes. Yeah, we now know to use our glutes in our back bends. We use our glutes so much more these days in our yoga practice than, say, 10 or 20 years ago. So in this exercise, you squeeze the ball, lift your knee. Inhale, lower. Exhale, lift. Inhale, lower. Keep that going for 6, 5. And you want to make sure that your top hip doesn't slide back, that it stays stacked. 3, 2, and 1. Now halfway down and up for 10, 9. You can keep squeezing into the ball. 8. You'll feel how that activates your core as you squeeze into the ball or the block. 2, 1. Hold it up. 2 breaths. Notice that you're now getting better. 360 rib breathing. It takes a while to reprogram its brain as well as body. Patterns are hard to break sometimes. Roll on your back to go to the other side. Lie down, hold your ball or your block overhead. This also helps because often when students do this exercise, they kind of round like a little baby shrimp. They curl up in fetal position. So we want skull, scapula, and sacrum in line with one another. Now exhale, lift, inhale, lower. There's so many wonderful variations on your clamshell exercise. There's internal rotation with clamshell, with bands, all sorts of fun things you can do. 5, exhale, squeeze the ball. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now halfway down and up. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Hold it up there. 2 breaths. If you want a little extra, press the right outer knee down into the ground. That'll rev your right glute a little as well. Abduction, pressing away. Amazing. Lower. Whew, you're done with that. Come on up. Now, if you want to have a blanket under your front hip points, that might feel nice if they're bony. And I'm going to offer 2 options because, like I mentioned, if you are breastfeeding and it's early on, you can have that engorged feeling and it's not comfortable to lie on your belly. So I'm going to offer spinal balance pose, which is not on your belly, but does strengthen the multifidus. And you can take about 6 breaths, one arm and opposite leg, and then switch. Or if it's appropriate, you can lie down on your stomach and we'll do a little pulsing in super person arm position. So cactus goalpost arms face down, tops of the feet to the ground. And you're gonna lift up legs, chest, arms. And I know some of us can lift way up, but when we lift way up, we engage more of the superficial surface paraspinals. So just don't go quite as low. And instead, we're going to bob up and down here for 9. Like your nose touches the blanket or the ground. 8. And then lifts. 7. And the legs lift. You feel as you lift your legs, your lower back muscles really have to work. 6. 5. So notice if you favor lifting your torso. 4, or your legs, and can you find balance in that? 3, 2, 1. We're going to come on back up, all fours. And now I'm going to move this blanket so I have something sticky underneath me. So if you have a blanket down on your mat, I recommend that you do the same. And come to all fours once you're ready. Now in yoga, because we do quadrupeds, down dogs, dolphin pose, arm balances and inversions eventually, the way the arm connects into the back, I think of as a core muscle. Typically in bipedal, just walking around on our feet, the core is more here, right? But because we're on our hands, I want to get into the serratus anterior strength a little bit. And strengthening this muscle can really help the baby wrist, elbow, shoulder stuff that happens holding your 8-pound baby everywhere you go. So you're going to set up on your forearms. You could even put a block between thumb and index. Press the floor away from you so your shoulder blades protract or pull apart. And then tuck your toes, lift your knees, lift your hips. Knees can be bent or straight. You don't even have to lift the knees if you're like, whoa, that's a lot, right? Just push the floor away. You might even float your knees up a little bit or keep them down and push the floor away. Deep breath in. And as you exhale, press into the mat wherever you are, elbow to fingertips. Inhale. Exhale, root down into your foundation, your forearms. Feel that 360 rib breath here, upside down. One more. These inversions are great for the pelvic floor. We kind of lift up and take pressure off of the uterus, the bladder, the colon, pelvic organs. Okay, lower your knees. Good. Come on up to all fours. Move your block out of the way, and we're going to stand up. You can work either with a Courgeous ball or a yoga block for this next one. So this is my Courgeous ball. If you have a block, it can go middle or narrow in between your inner thighs. And you're going to squeeze in with your feet a hips width apart. So that will affect which width you choose to go with your block. Now, as you inhale, Utkatasana, weight in the heels, hips shift back, arms reach up, thumbs point back. Your pelvic floor stretches. As you exhale, stand, hug into the ball or the block. Feel your pelvic floor draw in and up, 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 and your 2 front hip points hug in. So inhale, soften and stretch your pelvic floor. And exhale, draw in and up, hug in, 2 front hip points. Open up through your hip flexors. Keep this going for 6. Exhale to stand. 5. Squeeze the ball or the block. Inhale. Exhale. 4. Inhale. Exhale. 3. 2. 1. Move the ball out of the way. This next one is Uddiyana Bandha Kriya. So I can't do and talk at the same time. So first I'll describe, then I'll show, then we'll do it once together. Yeah? So when you do this Kriya, don't do it if you're pregnant. You exhale, very forceful breath, all out through your mouth. Then you hold, you do not inhale. Your hands point inward, your toes point inward. This inward wrapping creates an upward lifting. You hold, you draw the belly in and up like you're sucking your belly in. This pulls your pelvic floor up like a toilet plunger on your pelvic floor. Because remember, thoracic diaphragm and pelvic floor move together. So as you hold the breath, this pulls the pelvic floor up. It's great for postpartum. Then as soon as you need to inhale, you relax your belly. You release your chin from your chest and you inhale, okay? So it looks like this. I take a neutral breath in between and then I repeat. If you'd like to give it a try, let's do one more together. Inhale. Exhale and hold. Good. All right, calf stretch from Katie Bowman. I'm going to use this half dome, which is what she recommends. But if you don't have one, I don't expect everyone does. Just roll up your mat as much as you'd like, as thick as you want to stretch your calf out. Stand to the ball of your right foot there. Step your left foot a little forward of there, and take a couple breaths with me. Feel the back of the lower right leg. Notice if your hips are jutting out to the right. Can you gather them in? And then switch. So your left ball of the foot is on the rolled up sticky mat or the half dome. Your right foot is just a baby footprint forward of it. Breathing into the back of the lower leg. Noticing the weight, even big toe mound ball of the foot, baby toe mound ball of the foot. Are your hips jutting out to the left like you're holding that baby on the hip? And come back to the center. Set the half dome or unroll the mat. Grab your strap. You can keep the little bubble if you'd like. Maybe just make it smaller so that you have more material. Backpack strap. So the chest and shoulders, we're going to give them a little love here. Place your strap at the height of your bottom edge of your shoulder blades. From there, bring it around in front of your chest, like this, like a backpack strap. Then, if it's a short strap, you just pull from there. Yes. If it's a long strap, X marks the spot, crisscross your strap bands, hold on, and give a firm pull. Yeah? Good. Right foot forwards, left foot back, warrior one. Pull the strap, open your chest. Tack your elbows in and back. Now notice, do your ribs pop open? Can you think of your ribs like the lid on a Tupperware closing down towards your front hip points as your breastbone lifts upwards? One more breath. Switch. Left foot forward, hold on to your backpack straps. Right leg back, hug your elbows in, get organized. And then again, notice, right, we all see this really often in our students, like this overarching of the back. And that doesn't help us breathe well and manage pressure well. So can you, in this pose, draw the front ribs down, lift the breastbone up, then descend to the left thigh. Two more. All right, step forward, release your strap, sit down. If you want to sit on a block or a blanket, go for it. We'll finish with a little thoracic rotation. So just a nice, easy cross-legged seat. Then breathe and relieve stress from sitting for long periods, feeling kind of frozen in our T-spine. Take your right hand out to the side, reach your left arm overhead, bend your elbow, left hand behind head. This is going to feel amazing to finish with. As you exhale, left elbow to the right, round your spine, drop your head. And as you inhale, open. And again, exhale, round. Inhale, open. Exhale, round. Inhale, open. Drop your left arm down below your left shoulder. Drop your head to the right. Open your left collarbone, stretching the neck and the chest and the shoulder. And then slowly come on up. And if you want to switch the cross of your legs, go for it. And then left hand out, right arm up, hand behind your head. Deep breath in. As you exhale, elbow down. Inhale up. Exhale, round. Inhale, open. Exhale, round. Inhale, open. Draw your right arm down below, hand below shoulder, head to the left. Take a deep breath in, widen the collarbone, right side. Sigh it out through your mouth. And then gently, slowly ease your way back up. All right, we'll finish here with the exercises. Thank you all so much for doing these with your body or with your eyes. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat, and I'll hand it off to Lizzie.
Thank you, Lily. Wanted to first apologize for any interruption.
It's all good.
We talked about this right before the webinar started. We're like, oh, if you have any computer issues, no wish. Like, no, we'll figure it out. We jinxed ourselves, so
all
apologies, everyone. But thank you so much, Lily, for joining us again on the BYogi webinar series. Don't forget to check out Lily's Prenatal Yoga Teacher Training, $200 discount with the code BOLSTER. She's putting it in the chat right now. We will be sending out the recording tomorrow with all of this information and ways to connect with Lily. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.